It's a half hour. I mean, not a full 40-minute, but. So D lunch? You have lunch right before? It's a struggle. Yeah, I feel your pain. Feel the pain. All right, yesterday we were taking a look at the intro to rhetoric, and we're going to finish these off today, this set of notes. I don't know if we'll be able to start the next one, which is going to be core concepts for winning a debate, which is more interesting probably for you because it's more about trying to actually win a debate, which I think is what people get interested in. At the end of the period, we were kind of going over a purpose and pretty much the topic thing. If you, and I think the bell was ringing, anyone still need to read any of this stuff? Nope. Just need to get a long paper behind. And I can show you some stuff at the end of class. So if you still need to write down anything so far as purpose, member entertainment, shock value, call to action, information, education, persuasion, all those things, those would certainly be something you want to kind of keep an eye on when it comes to what you are trying to do. Next week, alluded to it a couple times, SPAR debates. We're going to do our first couple speaking activities. Caitlin, I'm not going to pick on you, but I'm going to ask you a question. If you could debate anybody in this room, who would it be? How come? Okay, so just because you're familiar with her? Do you think you would beat her? Let's flip it. Sarah, would you beat her?
Yes.
Okay, and this would make you happy? Because what do you want to do? Win. Now, do you want to win?
Yeah.
All right. So, and yeah, I mean, and that's an issue that certainly a lot of us like to deal with, where if you're going to get in front of people and speak, you want to kind of win. Now, do you gain anything by winning, quotation mark, in here? What? Okay. Every now and then you might win points. I mean, if the two of you do debate next week, if you win, you get 10 points. If she wins, you get, we'll still give you 9. We won't make it 0. But the winner gets an extra point. Now, other times we'll do a debate. You don't gain anything if you win. I mean, you might feel better about yourself, but you're not going to absolutely gain anything. Let's say Caitlin does a debate against Sarah. All of you folks are a year or two away from graduation, and majority of you, if not all, what are you going to do after graduation? Like the following school year, not like the next day, going to college. What's, I'll call it a trend or a fad, but what are people starting to do in between graduation of high school and beginning of college? Still going to college, but that time for some isn't 3 months, but they'll make it more like 12, 15 by doing a gap year. Gap year, most people stay at home, work, make some extra money to help them pay for school, because school ends up being very expensive. Could you see yourself doing a gap year? No gap year, Sarah says gap year. Two of you come up, do a debate. Natalie has no idea what she wants to do. Of course, she hasn't really thought about the idea about having a gap year. What does she gain by this debate taking place? Now she's gaining more information, if she hasn't heard about it, possibly in education. So by the two of you debating the issue, sure, you still want to win, but you are informing, educating the audience, and in some cases maybe persuading. But you're giving them information about a topic that they haven't really thought about before, maybe. And that's one of the main goals that we try to look at throughout the course of the year. Certainly, there is going to be some entertainment, maybe some shock value, but a lot of times the purpose of that debate, that friction that's going to take place, is to give people a better idea about a particular topic that they haven't really thought about. Presidential debate, you want to win because it's votes. But something like that, your life probably isn't going to be drastically changed if she beats you in the debate, but you've helped people make a better decision as to what they want to do. Yesterday we were writing down the 5 rhetorical appeals, the logos, the ethos, pathos. They're coming up again. This is just where we're going to do the definitions for them. You remember logos? Yeah. Good. So, logos, this is going to be the appeal to logic. We'll zoom in here for you if I can remember how to do it. There we go. And there we don't go. Are you getting dizzy yet? I put text in here in the sense of
you're doing a speech. This also, though, kind of works for essays. So I didn't know if I wanted to use words, text. I figured text can be both spoken and written. So don't think about this necessarily as like an essay assignment that you're doing, but that it could go for speech or kind of writing. But appeal to logic is basically how your speech or how your text is going to be organized. There's a logical approach to what you're trying to do. Now, there are a lot of different ways that you can try to persuade people. And certainly, we're going to use a multitude of them. But logic is going to pretty much be the backbone, the main one. Because if you don't have the logic behind it, it's not going to work whatsoever for our purposes. What are other ways that you can try to persuade someone?
Terms. Which one's pathos? That's the emotional appeal. So you can get people to feel feelings, pity, love, trust, fear, anger, sympathy. And you can do that, but if you keep going back to that emotional appeal all the time, it tends to start to fall flat after a while. So logos is something that you certainly need to do to appeal to a sense of logic, how something, why it ultimately makes sense. The best way to have logic is to get facts, evidence, support for what you're going to do. Guys tend to fall into a trap of using a specific kind of evidence a little too often. I don't know if it's a sport, fantasy football reason behind it, but Alex, any guesses to what kind of evidence guys tend to use a lot? Sean? No. Math class. Statistics, numbers. I mean, females certainly can as well, but it seems like guys love to use statistics for everything, which is fine, but keep in mind, if you start going to the well too often, people can game plan for it. And when you deal with statistics, a lot of times it can be spun, either way, making up of the number. But let's say 52% of the citizens in the United States support legalization of marijuana. And so if Sean's using that for an argument for it, what's my comeback going to be? 48%, which is about half of the population, disagree with it. So I don't think we should, take off 50% of the population. So you use that statistic, but sometimes it can kind of flip the other way. So just kind of be careful with any kind of logic evidence that you don't go to the same thing all the time. And don't make up statistics, Andrew. I don't know why you would do that, but ethos. Again, I'll zoom in. Ethos is going to be the author or the speaker. It's what you bring to the table. It's your credibility. Now, this is something, and I'll zoom up here in a little bit so we can see what's down at the bottom. Actually, I think we are at the very bottom. Yeah. You can do some things to build up your ethos, but it's not something necessarily that you are going to say. Quentin, is there anybody you want to debate in class? Not that you get to pick these people, but... You up to the challenge?
Sure.
Okay. The two of them have a debate next week. I don't know about what. I'm drawing a blank right now. Did we mention shampoo and conditioner yesterday? Yeah, I thought we did. Did we do the dishwasher? No. Dishes in the dishwasher or hand washed? I'm going hand washed. It's good for the cuticles and you don't want your hands to wear out. Water's good. They smell nice. Excuse me. You're not part of this one. Ellie crushes you. Like, wipes the floor with you. Like, you have no chance whatsoever. What has she done now amongst you folks for the next time that we start pulling names out of a hat? What happens when her name gets pulled first? People start to go, I hope my name doesn't get pulled. Before that debate now begins, she is bringing certain credibility with her to the table. Now, it doesn't, again, have to be a fear factor by any means, but ethos is what you do bring to the table. So it's not your argument. Now, after you've had multiple successful arguments or credible sources and things like that, you could certainly build it. And at the same time, you could certainly diminish it. When Quentin's name gets picked first, now everyone's going, pick me, pick me, pick me. I saw what happened to him last time. And the ethos can certainly change based on the topic that's at hand. If you are dealing with an essay assignment for your English class, you might come to me for help, based on having me other years or knowing I'm an English teacher.
But if you're struggling with a chemistry test or homework assignment, you're probably not going to ask me about it. So in one situation, I could have the credibility. In the other situation, I might not have it based on what the subject area would be. So certainly dependent upon the topic, ethos might be a little bit different than others. If I read in the paper about any of you ever attempting to jump from the roof of one building to another building, I will disown you as a student and write letters of non-recommendation to all the people you ever meet. What's going to happen to Mr. Grant Birdsong when he sits in class next week at University of Pittsburgh in his communication class, and Sean goes, "Hey, you're the guy that got stuck between the buildings." What's happened to his ethos? It's probably gone down. The young lady that he was trying to impress, I assume he didn't, she stuck around the whole 6 hours. I find that impressive. My view of her has gone up. Wow, she's willing, she doesn't even really know this guy, but she stuck around the whole time and even called help. And then they jackhammered the wall in Qdoba. I know his ethos within Qdoba has completely vanished. They will never serve him food again for, probably the destruction that he's caused. So, simple little things, whether it be speech related, whether it be outside related, could certainly affect what the ethos would be. All right, and then pathos, this was the one that Caitlin was mentioning too. This is the emotional appeal. The issue with emotional appeal, though, is it rests upon the audience. You're dependent upon getting that reaction from the audience you want. And certainly, you might try to inject a little bit of humor into the speech to kind of lighten the mood or get people on your side, and you don't get any response whatsoever, it might backfire. If you are trying to be stern or serious, you're getting laughter back, that's certainly not going to work. Now, pathos can be very effective if you're able to tap into that emotion. And it's a good thing to do early on with the speech so that you do have that audience connection, but you don't want your whole argument to be based around an audience reaction, emotional reaction to what you're saying, because most of those reactions tend to be short-lived. What kind of emotional appeal do dictators probably have to use? Yeah, you use the fear. But that's going to be short term. It doesn't last for a long period of time. If Elise comes up with a sympathy story and we're trying to feel bad for her, it very well could work the first time. But if every single time she speaks, she tries to go back to the same sob story, it's not going to have that same effect, throughout the whole course of the semester. So just like anything with Logos or any of the other kind of devices, it's good to use it, but make sure you just do kind of go in moderation with it. And then we get the two new ones, or not new, but the ones that probably don't really hear as much or think about. You have Kairos, which is going to be setting. There's not a whole lot you can do about setting. It's going to be 9th period, C247, pretty much during all of your debates, I would think, throughout the course of the semester. However, this can be setting, can be time, location of the speech. Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech is given in Washington, D.C. in 1963. Anybody know or remember where in D.C. he is located at when he's given the speech?
I was going to say, in front of the Capitol.
It's not the Capitol. Good guess, though. It's at the Lincoln Memorial. So he's at the bottom of the steps of Lincoln Memorial. If you can't picture the Lincoln Memorial, steps going up columns, and who's inside the Lincoln Memorial? Not literally, but big statue of Lincoln sitting in his easy chair. He starts off the speech, King, in 1963, 100 years after Lincoln signs the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing all the slaves ending slavery, 5 years ago. And score means 20 years, so 5 times 20, 100 years ago. Can you think of any other speeches where you've heard the term score before? Gettysburg Address, 7 years ago. So standing in front of Lincoln, he mimics Lincoln's words, and you're also praising something that he did 100 years ago. It really kind of sets the whole tone and the idea with what he's doing for the speech. Now, if he stood in front of the Capitol building,
in 1963 and gave the same exact speech, it would still get remembered as one of the most powerful, effective speeches within U.S. history. I'm pretty confident about that. But the fact that he's in front of the Lincoln Memorial just kind of adds to it in itself. Now, again, you're kind of constrained a little bit with what you can do setting-wise. There could be a couple different things. Maybe you like standing here better because you know you're going to be fidgety. And if you're standing here, we might see you moving around a little bit more. Now, that might be something simple you could do. 3 years ago, we do student congress. You propose bills. We'll debate about them, pro, con, ask questions, and we vote on these bills. Sometimes they're serious. They're all usually fairly serious, but they go in different directions. I think it was 3 years ago, student proposed that North Hills Senior High has metal detectors that students would walk through every day coming into school. How do you think the vote for that one went? It did not pass. So not good in the sense of if he was trying to get it passed. I think it was he. I don't remember the number, but it was like a 17-2 kind of vote. It wasn't the next day, but I know it was that week. I think it was like 3 days later was when there was the stabbing at Franklin Park in the high school, or Franklin Regional. We didn't go back and revisit the bill, but I did ask, hey, that bill, what would your vote be for now? And it did not completely change, but it was more like a 50-50 kind of split. So depending on what's happening within the setting, time, place, overall within society, you certainly could get some different reactions to ideas that are being brought up. Some things you might realize this is the perfect time and place to do it. Others you might go, you know what, this isn't the right subject for this time. I mean, you've been in situations where it's not the time and place to discuss certain things. That's where this kind of comes into effect. A booth at Eaton Park is not the time to discuss the future of a relationship, with somebody. It might not work out so well. Nor is jumping from rooftop to rooftop the time and place to figure that out. And then last one, telos. And when it says not widely used in modern rhetoric, meaning the sense that it's not something that people always necessarily think about quite as much. And this goes back to the purpose slide that we had earlier. Attitude, purpose of the speech, what you are trying to do. And this can be as simple as that whole idea of winning, educating, or are you trying to persuade, manipulate, get something out of a deal? So consider that part as well. It's not only what you say, but how you say it and what the overall intent is. Make sure that you're not coming up just to speak, but that there is a certain objective that you are trying to fulfill. So those would be the overall 5. So ethos, pathos, logos, and then the kairos and telos. Good deal. We're going to skip video for time. All right. Aristotle's structured argument. So first he came up with, these are the rhetorical appeals, then he comes up with a structure. I don't think you are going to have to write all 4 things down, because if you take a look at it, and we'll zoom in on them, you got an introduction, statement, viewpoint, thesis statement, the overall argument or proof, and then the conclusion. I think that kind of makes sense for most of us. While we zoom in on them, if there's something about any of them that jumps out to you, I would write that down. I'm thinking conclusion, where you have the 4 parts, would be the one to really take note of. Experience as an English teacher tells me the conclusion is usually the weakest paragraph in an essay, because Caitlin has given up or isn't sure what else to write at this point. So that might be something to keep in mind. Not saying that you will use this for your essays, because certainly speaking and writing are 2 different things. Keep in mind, going with speaking and writing being 2 different things, you're not given handouts of your speeches. So when Andrew has a point, or Ryan, that he really wants to emphasize, you have to make sure you do it verbally, because you're not going to go back and reread what a person has said or necessarily listen to it. And so kind of think that where a lot of the things up here might seem a little repetitive, where it keeps saying go back to the topic, go back to the thesis statement. Well, the reason being, a person can't read back. They have to listen to it over and over and over again. What do we do in the introduction? I don't think we really need to spend more time on this, but we should. take into consideration audience. When we have the battle of Caitlin and Sarah, who's the audience? It's all these folks. Because there was a question earlier in the day, second period, how do I know if I won, the debate? Well, after they debate whether it be shampoo and conditioner, washing dishes by hand, or putting them in the dishwasher, stairs or escalators, they'll turn around, face the board, we'll take a vote. Whoever gets more wins. So I could be sitting in the back of the room going, I think Sean's debate against Elise was a little bit better, but Elise gets all the votes. Too bad. You're out of luck. She won. That's the audience. Whereas later in the year, you're giving a more formal speech. Alex gives his argument about who knows what. He's being booed loudly by Danielle, who is in close proximity and is throwing vegetables at him. But I'm sitting in the back of the room thinking this is really good. I'm the audience because I'm the one who's assessing your grade. So you might view things a little bit differently depending upon who you're speaking to. Andrew, I think it was like yesterday I asked you, would you speak differently to your brother than you would to me? It's considering your audience. You're going to speak differently to parents than you are, maybe to teachers or parents of friends and things like that. So make sure you do consider who you're speaking to, who you're trying to convince. Obviously make that good impression. Try to establish your ethos, your credibility, why you are a good person to speak about it, and then you can appeal to that emotion, but you're just going to tap into it a little bit before you actually get into that overall logical appeal that you're going to try to do later on. But certainly considering who your audience is going to be is a key thing. Then comes the statement, that point of view, that thesis statement. And I think this is something that sometimes folks will neglect because they assume that we all know exactly what you are going to discuss. We might state that Shay is in favor of escalators. Luke's in favor of stairs. Use them every day. So we kind of know what you're discussing, but certainly it would still be important for them to state their position so we know word for word really what their feelings, their ideas, their point of view is about it. A lot of times people will kind of neglect this idea because they assume we know where they're going to be. Certainly you don't want to promise more than you can actually prove or deliver. This third part you're not going to worry about because if we're pulling debates from a hat, I've decided it's debatable. If you're doing a topic that you've chosen, you've already checked with me to see if it's debatable or not. So that's going to be taken care of. But you want to make sure you refer back to that thesis, that point of view a lot of the time, most of the time throughout the course of the speech. As you promote evidence and provide it, you want to make sure you explain how that goes back to that overall viewpoint. So just don't assume that we always will follow along with your argument. Make sure you make that connection very clear, explicit, as opposed to being implicit where we have to try to figure it out on our own. Then we come to the proof, the actual argument. Could be coming from a variety of places. Certainly facts are going to be appropriate where you're trying to build up a logos. Personal stories can work. Just don't make them up. I was looking at Andrew, but then I was like, he's going to get nervous. So then I kind of shifted over to Alex because he was looking at me. But you seem nervous. Why are you worried? Do you make things up? Are you comfortable being a liar? Okay. Testimonials would work, where it's not going to be your personal stories, but it could be things that you've heard, be it in a hallway, expert's opinion that you've talked to or are aware of. Certainly want to try to select the best examples that are available. It's also wise to try to figure out what the opponent is going to do or bring up. Benji, do you care if you speak first or second when it comes to debate? I think you'd have a preference. Depends upon the topic. No? Anybody have a preference? Think going first or second? You want to go second? Anybody want to go first?